I would like to call up our first guest. And this guest, our first speaker, is no stranger to the Scarborough Muslim Association. He was born and raised in Toronto and went to England to complete his Alamiya studies, where he graduated as an Islamic scholar from the world-renowned seminary Darul Uloom Bury. He returned to Canada, where he taught in many different places, and amongst them he taught here at Jame Bakr Siddique at the Scarborough Muslim Association. He was a teacher to many of the students, myself included, and he served various roles in this masjid and has been a big support for this masjid. Even today, he's currently part of the Pearls of Paradise organizing team and continues to support the SMA. He's currently the Imam of Islamic Center of Oshawa, where he serves as the Imam, and also he serves as the President of the Canadian Council of Muslim Theologians and is part of the Board of Directors at Khalil Center Canada. I want to call up Mama Shaykh Pandor.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وقالوا الحمد لله الذي أذهب عنا الحزن. وقال الله تبارك وتعالى بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. Respected Ulama Kiram, respected elders, brothers, mothers and sisters, honestly it's an honor for me to be here amongst yourselves, and I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants me the tawfiq to say that which is appropriate for the occasion and beneficial for myself and for all of us that are sitting here. The topic that I have been given is Prophetic Guide to Mental Health. I was given the time from 1:40 to 2 o'clock, and to be completely honest, it's a very short time to discuss something which is very, very important. As Mufti Abdul Hay introduced the discussion and the topic, or our presence here today, our event, the issue of mental health is something that's becoming more and more common of a discourse, and something that's being spoken about more, not just in the broader communities, but even in our community. And to understand what does Islam say about it, and how does Islam address the issue. I know that there's some talks that are coming up after mine, which are also connected, right? And so to not overlap and to try and stick to, inshallah, what I can mention that would be beneficial, inshallah, is something that I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows me to do. One of the interesting discussions when it comes to mental health, is that, insanity, which was generally the only way to understand mental health previously. A while ago, people would, when they would think about mental health, if I was to ask you, when I say mental health, which part of the body comes to your mind? Which part of the body comes to your mind? Yes, right. Your intellect, your reason, right? Your cognition, your ability to think, and that's really in the brain. But what's really interesting is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, in a verse of the Quran, لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ لَا يَفْقَهُونَ بِهَا. They have hearts with which they don't understand. This is very interesting. I was sitting and discussing with a psychiatrist, Dr. Asim Yusuf, better known as Talib al-Habib. We were at a gathering, and while he was visiting, and he said this verse is very, very interesting. It's very intriguing, because when you talk about mental health, the first place you talk about is the mind, and everything to do with the mind. And that's become more the discussion, cognitive disorders and areas, issues related to the ability of the person to think optimally and properly. But the Quran goes into a broader discussion, and this is what the prophetic guidance related to mental health actually is going to be about. And it's no surprise that many, if not all of the prophets, were accused of being mentally ill by their nations. Right? In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there's multitude of verses that talk about junoon. Right? And from Nuh alayhi salam until the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, we will find verses in the Quran. And interestingly, all of those prophets are ulul azm prophets. At least the ulul azm prophets, those prophets were known as prophets of great determination. Right? Each one of them was accused of being insane. So much so that the Quran actually had to come out and tell, when it came to the time of the Prophet ﷺ, it had to actually come out and say, مَا بِصَاحِبِكُم مِّن جِنَّةٍ. There is no jinn with your, jinnah over here is actually mental disability. Right? There's nothing wrong with your Prophet's ability, with your companion's ability to think. He's sane in his mind. And this issue which Mufti Abdul Hayy talked about and touched upon, the issue of our communities getting confused between, the stigma related to mental health, and one of those aspects, the areas of discussion that comes into is the issue of jinn and jinn possession, right? And understanding the relationship between jinn possession and a mental health disorder. Right, can be confused between the two. Which it's interesting that even in the Prophet ﷺ's own life, when the Prophet ﷺ was approached by a man by the name of Abu al-Walid Utbah bin Rabi'ah. Right? Abu al-Walid Utbah bin Rabi'ah came to the Prophet ﷺ at one instance. It's a famous story. Shaykh Abul Hasan Nadi rahmatullahi alayhi mentions it in his Rahmatul Sirah, in his Sirah about the Prophet ﷺ. Mufassirin have mentioned it under the Surah Hamim Sajda, where this man comes to the Prophet ﷺ after consulting with the leaders of the Quraysh, and the Prophet ﷺ sitting in the Haram of Makkah around the Kaaba, and he presents to him some presentation, starts giving him a very sweet speech that, look, Muhammad, you've come to our community. Don't you see what you've done? You've separated this community. And then he starts asking, he says, what is it that you want? Do you want wealth? We'll give you wealth. And if you want women, we'll give you women. Do you want to become the king? We'll give you king. Then he separates. Is it a shaitan that's bothering you, that's coming to you? If that's a shaitan, then we'll deal with that. Is it insanity that you're dealing with? If it's insanity, then we'll get you the best of doctors. And over here, he separates between the shaitan issue, the jinn issue. Abu al-Walid Utbah bin Rabi'ah is separating between the jinn issue and also the issue of insanity. He doesn't classify that as one. He classifies them separately. It was something that they also understood was something which is separate. So the discussion on the prophetic guide to mental illness really requires that we touch upon the topic of optimal health. Understand that Islamically speaking, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the human being with good health. Health is not separated in just to mental health. Mental health is obviously one part of being healthy, but the desire, the wish, or what should be the case for every human being is to have optimal health. And that's why we find many du'as of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam on sihha, right? on sihha, sadha, right? Sihha, right? And sihha is an overall state of health, right? An overall state of health. It could be related to mental health. It could be related to physical health. It could also be related to spiritual health. And this is where Islam is broader than our current definitions of mental health. So when discussing mental health from a prophetic perspective, there's a couple of terms that we need to really understand. Like I said, I know that the time is definitely going to be very short, but one of the terms that we need to actually discuss is tarbiyah. Another term that we would actually need to discuss is aql. Right? So tarbiyah is the process of character refinement. Aql would actually be translated as cognition. Right? Your thinking ability, your ability to think, or your thinking. The other term that we'd actually have to discuss in discussing prophetic guidance would be ruh, the spirit. The other term that we'd actually have to discuss, or the organ, would be the qalb, the heart. Another term that we would actually have to discuss would be the nafs, the behavioral inclinations. Another term that we would actually have to discuss would be ihsas, which would be emotions or sensations. Another term that we would actually have to discuss is inkishaf, which is introspective awareness. Another term that we'd have to discuss is i'tidal, achieving balance across human elements. Another term that we would have to discuss is ittihad, which is all part of one psyche, unite and work together in serving its primordial goal of connecting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which in Arabic is known as ma'rifah. And another term that we would have to discuss is taklif, responsibility. As a human being, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created the human being responsible, mukallaf. When it comes to the idea of taklif or being mukallaf, the scholars discuss that a person is only mukallaf based on two competences. Number one is that their mental competence, right? And the second is their physical capacity. If a person is not mentally competent, then they are not responsible for an action. And that's why a child is not responsible for their actions until they don't reach puberty. Why is that? Why is a child not responsible for their actions until they reach puberty? It's because mentally they're not considered to be competent. And similarly, if a person is physically incapable of committing an action, then they would also be exempt. And that's where we get the rules. Sometimes when we discuss, for example, in fasting, where generally it comes with women who are pregnant or who are breastfeeding. Can they fast? You get a lot of questions at the time of fasting in relation to that. Well, these two things together are what makes a person mukallaf. This human being is mukallaf because they are mentally competent and they are also physically capable to do their actions. And that's when this person is considered to be responsible by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that responsibility of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it deals with the understanding of this person as being able to not just to be able to think, but also able to think with their heart. That's what the verses of the Quran pointed out to. لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ لَا يَفْقَهُونَ بِهَا. They have hearts with which they do not think. So from an Islamic theological perspective, psycho-spiritual health is directly related to the human being's ability to actualize their primordial spiritual purpose. So it's broader. From a Western or from a psychological perspective, from a modern psychiatric perspective, right? The classification is only to deal with impairment across social, occupational, or familial functioning. And Islam makes it broader than that. Islam is not limited to just those three. It's broader than that. And that's the challenge between our modern understanding of mental health disorders and the Islamic understanding. Islam targeted this from the beginning. The Prophet ﷺ, what was the first action that he had to do in order to get his prophethood? Allah made him meditate in a cave. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him dreams. Right? And the dreams were considered part of Nabuwah. That was on his cognition, his ability to think about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How difficult was that on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? The hadith of Bukhari, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, I still know till today the stones that used to say salam to me when I used to visit the cave. And at that time, what happened to me? Right? What happened to the Prophet ﷺ? When he gets his first revelation, what happens to the Prophet ﷺ? He comes to Khadija radiallahu anha, in the words of Bukhari, in the third hadith of Bukhari Sahih, which is called Kitab al-Iman, under the book of Iman, book of faith. The first thing the Prophet ﷺ says, Inni khashitu ala nafsi. I'm scared for myself. I'm scared something's trying to take my life. He tried, and to understand in context is a little challenging, so I don't know if I should mention it exactly. But the Prophet ﷺ, when he used to get that salam from the stones and from the trees, it used to weigh on him. Right? They used to say, Assalamu alayka ya Rasulullah. Peace be upon you, Messenger of Allah. He used to look around. He wouldn't see anything. He used to think, is this crazy? He wanted to throw himself off of the mountain. Right? That was what thought came to him. Why? That's the cognitive issues that a person has to deal with. The Prophet ﷺ himself said, Inni khashitu ala nafsi. And what happens? His wife, Khadija radiallahu anha, she counsels him, she mentions some things to him. What happens after that? He goes to Waraq bin Nawfal, What happened in front of Waraq bin Nawfal? Waraq bin Nawfal, you know, he addresses it, you know, speak with my nephew. He speaks, and he says, this is what's happened, this is what happened to me. And he tells him that, you know what, that a time's going to come when your own people are going to kick you out of here. He said, oh, these people are going to kick me out? He couldn't understand it. It was challenging on the mind. And like that, you know, we find many other examples. Actually, why I recited Surah Al-Fatiha is because, like I said, I don't even have time. I'm constantly glancing at the time, which makes it a bit more challenging to speak. But I started with Surah Al-Fatiha because actually, the first verse of the Quran, it deals with our ability to think. Islam is based on your ability to think. Right? Islam is about ma'rifah, recognition. That's why the famous ayah of the Quran, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, that I have not created you, O human being, and jinn except for my worship. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu translates that as ma'rifah, which I translated as all parts of one's psyche unite together in serving its primordial goal of connecting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So from that one ayah alone, we could talk about the human being's necessity for being sound in their mind, optimal mental health, right? Being sound in their mind, to be able to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala correctly. That requires for their aql, their ruh, and their qalb, and their nafs to have i'tidal, right? To be just and balanced, right? And so, you know, the scholars will discuss, you know, from prophetic traditions, that the first way to deal with this issue is actually what they call inkishaf, where a person is exposed to their flaws, not just, you know, the ability to think about what they want to think about. It's actually to be able to think about what Allah wants them to think about. And that's why it's broader. And again, it comes back to the relationship between the mind and the heart, and how the heart is actually the reason that a person thinks. You know, that's what Dr. Asim Yusuf, who's a psychiatrist, was mentioning. He was saying that most, if not all, thoughts are emotional. There is no, you know, he said there is something called a rational thought, which people think that thinking is just rational. And the Quran says it's not. Thoughts are actually emotional. Because even when they're rational, they're emotional. Right? Even when they're rational, they're emotional. It's from your heart that you think. Right? It's from your heart that you think. That's why, you know, when you tell your spouse, if you're married, that I love you, right? When people will tell their spouse that they love them, usually they'll, you know, Valentine's Day is coming up, I guess, and so they'll put a big heart. They don't put it with their mind, right? They don't put a picture of their mind and, you know, take an X-ray of their mind and put, you know, I love you, right? And this, I love you with my mind, right? They say, I love you with my heart, right? Because the heart has always been a metaphor across all cultures of understanding emotions, not just because it's an emotion, but that's what actually helps a person to think. A person thinks because of their heart. Right? A person is affected because of their heart. And that's what Allah says, لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ لَا يَفْقَهُونَ بِهَا. He used the word fiqh, right? Which is a deep understanding. Right? Fiqh is generally you know, a subject that's taught within the alim class. But it's not just you know, a subject that's taught within the alim class. Anything that you understand about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is fiqh. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ says, مَنْ يُرِدِ اللَّهُ بِهِ خَيْرًا يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. Whoever Allah wishes to do good with, Allah gives them an understanding about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So, again, I know I've just touched upon the topic, and I know that my time's already up, and I haven't really got into it. But prophetic guidance, like I said, why I chose to recite Surah Al-Fatiha is because the first thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about is tarbiyah. Right? Tarbiyah. And tarbiyah, like I pointed out, was the process of character refinement. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does the tarbiyah of everything. Anything that Allah creates, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does his tarbiyah. But the tarbiyah of the human being, right? The tarbiyah of the human being is left up to the individual after bulugh, after reaching puberty, after reaching the stage where they are responsible for their own self. Right? Parents are responsible for a child until when? Until they reach puberty. After that, what happens? This child is responsible for themselves. That taklif is their own responsibility. Which means now they have to worry about their ability to think and their ability to act. Because both of them the ability to think properly and the ability to do properly is what makes them mukallaf, what makes them responsible in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So a junoon, it's very interesting, in a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has put children and the insane person, the person who's mentally disabled, together. رُفِعَ الْقَلَمُ عَنْ ثَلَاثٍ. The pen has been lifted from three. الصبي والنائم والمجنون. Right? Okay, it's a white card, not a red card. But in football and soccer they give you red cards. But first it's a yellow card. But I guess. So the Prophet ﷺ says that the pen has been lifted from the child, the mentally disabled, and the person who's sleeping. Because the person who's sleeping is like the person who's mentally disabled. They're not functioning properly. So in their dream, they're seeing a whole bunch of things, and they're not sure what they're seeing. And some parents might think that their children are always sleeping, right? And so they're mentally incapable, like, you're always sleeping, right? You're always drowsy. But like I said, there's a lot more to discuss, and I only was able to probably mention the terms. I know that the speakers after me, Shaykh Umar and Shaykh Ramzi, inshallah, will also be kind of reflecting on the Islamic side of things, so I guess I will have to stop here. In order for them to be able to continue, for the program to be able to continue. One thing that I can leave us with, there's some du'as that the Prophet ﷺ did teach us. There's a du'a that the Prophet ﷺ would recite every morning for optimal mental health. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-hammi wal-hazan. We should try to recite that du'a on a daily basis. Also, we should try to recite the du'a, Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim. And Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim is not just about about worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the physical acts of worship. That's also part of it, but recognizing everything that a person needs to recognize about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hidayah is, there's different levels of hidayah, and so Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim serves for that function as well. These are du'as that we should try to make. Pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps us to understand and practice.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه أجمعين. أما بعد، مولانا شاکر صاحب نے جو بیان کیا ہے انشاءاللہ بہت مختصر طریقے سے اس کا ترجمہ کرنا ہے. پہلے زمانے میں جب مینٹل ہیلتھ دماغی بیماری اس کا نام لیا جاتا تھا تو لوگوں کے دماغ میں جنون، یہ مینٹل ہے مطلب وہ پاگل ہے. اس کے علاوہ اور کوئی لفظ یا کوئی ڈیفینیشن لوگوں کے دماغ میں نہیں تھی یا سوسائٹی میں نہیں تھی. لیکن آج کل جو ہے یہ ٹاپک بہت بحث کیا جاتا ہے، جس کی وجہ سے اب تھوڑا تھوڑا لوگوں میں اویئرنیس پیدا ہو رہا ہے کہ جس طریقے سے ہماری جسمانی صحت ضروری ہے ویسے ہماری مینٹلی اور دماغی صحت بھی بہت ضروری ہے. اس کے بعد مولانا صاحب نے فرمایا کہ جنون کے علاوہ ہمارے دماغ میں کوئی اور پرابلم ہوتا ہے، یعنی جس کا اثر ہماری باڈی کے اوپر پڑتا ہے، ہم سے دوسرے ایسے اعمال اور افعال ظاہر ہونے لگتے ہیں جو نارمل آدمی نہیں کرتا، تو لوگ اس کو جنات اور جو ہے عصیب سے تعبیر کر دیتے ہیں کہ اس کو کچھ جنات کا اثر ہو گیا، یہ ہو گیا، اور ہم اسی کو جو ہے بیماری کا دوسرا نام دے دیتے ہیں جنون کے علاوہ کہ اس کو جو ہے یہ بیماری کوئی نہیں ہے، یہ جنات کا اثر ہے یا کسی نے کچھ کھلا دیا وغیرہ. حالانکہ مولانا فرماتے ہیں کہ حضور صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم کے زمانے میں آپ صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم کے پاس جب وحی آنا شروع ہوئی، آپ صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم نے جب مکہ والوں کو دعوت دینا شروع کی تو ان کا ایک سردار، اس کا نام ولید بن عتبہ بن ربیعہ، وہ آپ صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم کے پاس آیا اور اس نے آپ صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم سے باتیں کی، اور اس کے بعد آپ صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم کو کہا کہ آپ کو شیطان نے مس کیا ہے، یعنی کیا شیطان کا اثر ہے آپ سے، تو ہم کسی کو بلائیں جو آپ کا علاج کرے. یا ابھی کا جنون، اس نے ایک دوسرا لفظ تھا کہ آپ کو کوئی جنون ہے، یعنی کوئی دماغی بیماری ہے جس کا بھی ہم علاج کر سکتے ہیں، اور اس کے علاوہ کچھ اور بھی چیزیں اس نے ذکر کی. اس کے بعد آپ صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم نے سورہ حامیم سجدہ پڑھی اور وہ جو ہے دنگ رہ گیا کہ یہ کلام کسی انسان کا نہیں. اسی لیے فرماتے مولانا صاحب کہ قرآن پاک میں اللہ سبحانہ و تعالیٰ نے انبیاء علیہ السلام کی جو سٹوریز بیان کی، ان کے اندر بہت سارے انبیاء علیہ السلام کو ان کی قوم نے جنون اور مجنون ہونے کا خطاب کیا کہ آپ لوگ مجنون ہیں، پاگل ہیں. اوبیسلی وہ پاگل نہیں تھے، سب کو پتا تھا. ان کی مراد یہ تھی کہ ان کو کوئی دماغی بیماری لگ گئی جس کی وجہ سے تم ایسا کچھ بول رہے. تو یہ جو ٹاپک ہے مولانا صاحب فرماتے ہیں کہ اب دھیرے دھیرے جو ہے اس کی اویئرنیس پیدا ہو رہی ہے. اسلامی اعتبار سے اگر ہم دیکھیں تو اس کا میننگ بہت وائڈ ہے. اسلامی اعتبار سے کیسے میننگ وائڈ ہے کہ یہ لوگ جب ٹارگیٹ کرتے ہیں دماغی صحت کو یا مینٹل ہیلتھ کو تو صرف دماغ کو ٹارگیٹ کرتے ہیں اور اسی کے اوپر فوکس کرتے ہیں، جبکہ ہمارے اسلام میں یہ کہا گیا ہے کہ اس کی جڑ جو ہے وہ دل ہے. اسی لیے قرآن پاک میں فرمایا لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ لَا يَفْقَهُونَ بِهَا، یعنی انسان کا جو دماغ ہے وہ سوچتا ہے لیکن اس کو کنٹرول اس کا دل کرتا ہے. اسی وجہ سے مولانا صاحب نے اس کی مثال دی کہ جو آدمی اپنی بیوی کو اگر آئی لو یو بولتا ہے تو اس کو جو ہے وہ دماغ کا پکچر نہیں لکھتا، اس کو ڈرا کرتا ہے، بلکہ اس پر ہارٹ ڈرا کرتا ہے. مطلب یہ ہے کہ وہ بتا رہا ہے کہ میں آپ کو جو ہے اپنے دل سے پیار کرتا ہوں، محبت کرتا ہوں، دماغ سے نہیں، کیونکہ دماغ کو دل کنٹرول کرتا ہے. یہ جو ہے ان کی بات کا خلاصہ ہے. انہوں نے بہت سارے ٹرمز وغیرہ استعمال کیے. بہرحال تو یہ ہے کہ ہمارے اسلام میں اس کا تعلق صرف جو ہے دماغ سے ہے، دل. اسی لیے انبیاء علیہ السلام کو بھی انسان کے دلوں پر محنت کی جو ہے تاکید کی گئی، اور اسی لیے وہ دنیا کے اندر جو ہے وہ تشریف لاتے تھے کہ انسان کی سوچنے کی طاقت صحیح بنے. اللہ پاک نے قرآن پاک کے شروع میں الحمدللہ رب العالمین فرمایا، اور انسان کو کس طریقے سے سوچنا چاہیے اللہ سبحانہ و تعالیٰ نے اس کی بھی جو ہے ہمیں گائیڈ، اس کو بھی ہمیں سمجھایا ہے. اور آگے مولانا صاحب فرماتے ہیں کہ اللہ تعالیٰ کی بہت بڑی نعمت صحت جو ہے، ہم اس کو صرف جسمانی صحت سے تعبیر کرتے ہیں، حالانکہ شریعت میں مکلف ہوا ہوتا ہے جو دماغی اعتبار سے بھی صحیح ہو اور جسمانی اعتبار سے. مثلا کوئی بچہ ہے تو بھی شریعت کے اعتبار سے دماغی اعتبار سے وہ صحیح نہیں ہے، اسی لیے وہ مکلف نہیں، اس پر نماز فرض نہیں. کوئی آدمی دماغی اعتبار سے برابر ہے لیکن جسمانی اعتبار سے وہ بیمار ہے تو اس اعتبار سے بھی وہ مکلف نہیں ہے. دونوں چیزیں جب انسان میں ہوگی تو وہ آدمی مکلف بنے گا. بہرحال تو آدمی جیسے جسمانی صحت کی فکر کرتا ہے ویسے اس کو جو ہے اس کی دماغی صحت کی بھی فکر کرنی چاہیے. اور مولانا صاحب فرماتے ہیں بہت لمبا ٹاپک ہے اور اس کے لیے جو ہے بہت ساری ٹرمز انہوں نے استعمال کیے، معرفت اور انکشاف اور جو ہے وہ دوسری چیزیں. لیکن مجھے کہا گیا کہ سارا بیان 3-4 منٹ میں اس کا ٹرانسلیشن کرنا ہے. سب سے پہلی بات وہ فرماتے ہیں کہ ہمیں صبح شام دعاؤں کا اہتمام کرنا چاہیے. وہ دعائیں جو ہمیں بتائی گئی ہیں انشاءاللہ ہم دعاؤں کو پڑھیں گے، اللہ سبحانہ و تعالیٰ ہمیں جسمانی اعتبار سے بھی معتدل رکھیں گے اور جو ہے دماغی اعتبار سے بھی معتدل رکھیں گے. اور وہ دعاؤں میں سے ایک تو سورہ فاتحہ انہوں نے فرمائی. اسی طریقے سے ایک اور دعا ہے اللہم انی اعوذ بک من الہم والحزن واعوذ بک من العجز والکسل. یہ ایک دعا ہے واعوذ بک من غلبۃ الدین وقہر الرجال. یہ صبح شام ہمیں پڑھنی چاہیے. اور بھی بہت ساری دعائیں ہیں، آپ اپنے لوکل علماء سے معلوم کر سکتے ہیں اور اس کو جو ہے اپنی زندگی کا حصہ بنا سکتے ہیں اور اس کو بنانا چاہیے. آپ صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم نے اسی لیے ہمیں اس کو سکھایا ہے.